shattered glass. The scent of bleach burned my nostrils as I scrubbed harder at the stubborn wine stain on the pristine white tablecloth. My fingertips were raw, cracked from chemicals and the relentless 12-hour shifts at La Stella, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in the city. A place where a single meal cost more than my weekly paycheck. Where people like me were meant to be invisible. Maya. Table 7 needs resetting. The Cardano party will be here in 20 minutes. Marco, the floor manager, barely glanced at me as he passed, his voice clipped with the thinly veiled disdain he reserved for the cleaning staff. I nodded silently, my shoulders aching as I wrung out the cloth. The late October rain drummed against the tall windows, casting rippling shadows across the polished marble floors. Outside, the city lights blurred into watercolor smears of gold and silver, so different from the harsh fluorescent bulbs of my cramped apartment in the East District, where my twin daughters would be waiting. Emma and Lily, my 5-year-old miracles. The thought of their faces, identical button noses and mismatched socks, was the only thing keeping me upright. That, and the desperate need for this job after being laid off from the hospital where I'd worked as a nursing assistant for 6 years. One corporate merger, and suddenly single mothers with no college degree were redundant. I glanced at my watch. 9:17 p.m. Mrs. Patel from next door would need to leave by 10:30. The twins would be asleep, but I still had 3 more hours on my shift, and the twins' medicine wasn't going to pay for itself. The front door swung open, bringing with it a gust of cold air and the low rumble of expensive cars pulling up to the curb. I quickly gathered my cleaning supplies, making myself scarce as the Cardano party arrived. I'd learned early on that wealthy patrons preferred their service staff to be like ghosts, present when needed, invisible otherwise. I was halfway to the supply closet when I felt it. The strange electric charge that suddenly filled the room, the steady hum of conversation faltered. Even Marco, perpetually unimpressed, straightened his spine and smoothed down his already immaculate jacket. He had arrived. I didn't need to turn around to know who had entered. Everyone knew who Alessio Vitrelli was, even those of us who lived in a world far removed from his. Owner of half the city's high-rises, rumored kingpin of the Italian syndicate that controlled everything from luxury imports to the city's judges. I'd seen his face in newspapers, always in the society pages, never the crime section, though whispers of his true business followed him like shadows. Curiosity got the better of me. I risked a glance over my shoulder, just a quick peek. My breath caught in my throat. The photographs hadn't done him justice. Tall and broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent, Alessio Vitrelli commanded the space with a presence that seemed to bend the very air around him. His dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and cold perfection. But it was his eyes that held me frozen, storm gray and penetrating, as if he could see through walls, through flesh, through lies. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him like sentinels, their stances casual but their eyes constantly scanning the room. Bodyguards, obviously. A 3rd man leaned in to whisper something in his ear, and Vitrelli nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. I realized I'd been staring too long when Marco appeared at my elbow, his fingers digging painfully into my arm. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Get back to work." I mumbled an apology and hurried away, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. The supply closet offered a momentary sanctuary, and I leaned against the shelves, willing my heart to stop racing. Why was I so affected? He was just a man. A dangerous, powerful man, who could probably buy and sell my entire apartment building without blinking, but still just a man. When I emerged, the restaurant had shifted into a higher gear. Waiters glided across the floor with practiced precision. The sommelier was opening bottles worth more than my monthly salary. And Vitrelli's party had been seated at the private alcove in the back, the most exclusive table, naturally. I kept my head down, focusing on my tasks. There was a broken glass in the women's restroom that needed cleaning, Marco informed me curtly. As I knelt on the cold tile floor, carefully picking up the shattered pieces, I tried not to think about the twins' coughs that had been getting worse, or the eviction notice taped to our door this morning. 3rd one this year. "Mommy, why do we have to be quiet when the landlord knocks?" Emma had asked last week, her little face scrunched in confusion. I'd pulled her close, breathing in the scent of the dollar store shampoo that never quite got her curls untangled. "It's just a game we play, sweetie," I'd whispered, hating the lie. but hating the fear in her eyes more. A shard of glass sliced into my finger, jolting me back to the present. I bit back a cry as blood welled from the cut. Perfect. Just perfect. I wrapped my finger in a paper towel and finished cleaning up the glass, then slipped out to find a bandage from the first aid kit in the kitchen. The head chef glared as I rummaged through the supplies, but I'd grown accustomed to being treated like an inconvenience. The rest of the night blurred into a montage of spills and stains and aching feet. I was emptying a trash bin near the bar when I heard Marco's panicked voice. "What do you mean we're out of the 82 Brunello? Mr. Vitrelli specifically requested it." The sommelier spread his hands helplessly. "The last bottle was served to the ambassador last week. We have the 86. No. Marco ran a hand through his hair. "You don't substitute what Mr. Vitrelli asks for. Find it. Call other restaurants if you have to." I shouldn't have been listening. Should have kept my head down, stayed invisible. But the twins' faces flashed in my mind. Lily's wheezing that had worsened this morning, the prescription I couldn't afford to fill yet. "Excuse me," I said quietly, before I could think better of it. "I think there's another bottle." Both men turned to stare at me as if a mop had suddenly started speaking. "During inventory last week, I saw a bottle of 82 Brunello that had fallen behind the rack in the private cellar," I continued, my voice growing smaller under their incredulous gazes. "I reported it to Antonio, but he was busy with the delivery." The sommelier's eyes widened. "Show me," he demanded. 5 minutes later, I was vindicated as he carefully extracted the dusty bottle from its hiding place. "This is it," he confirmed, his earlier disdain replaced by something almost like respect. "How did you even notice this?" I shrugged. "I notice things. It's part of cleaning thoroughly." What I didn't say was that I'd spent 6 years in a hospital paying attention to details, because sometimes those details meant life or death. Marco snatched the bottle. "Get back to work," he ordered, but there was less bite in his tone than usual. I retreated to the main floor, resuming my invisible rounds. The restaurant had emptied somewhat, but Vitrelli's party remained, their low conversation occasionally punctuated by laughter. I kept my distance, focusing on the far side of the dining room. It was nearly midnight when disaster struck. I was clearing empty glasses from a recently vacated table when a drunken patron stood up abruptly, bumping into me. The tray tilted, and a half-full champagne flute tipped over the edge, splashing its contents directly onto the plush cream carpet. "Watch it," the man snapped, as if I had been the one to collide with him. "I'm so sorry, sir," I murmured, already dropping to my knees to blot the stain before it set. Marco materialized beside me, all cutting smiles for the patron and venomous glares for me. "Please forgive our clumsy staff," he simpered. Then, under his breath to me, "Clean it properly. If that stain sets, it's coming out of your pay." My stomach clenched. I couldn't afford another deduction. Not with Lily's medication and the rent already overdue. I hurried to get the specialized cleaning solution, then returned to scrub at the stubborn stain. The carpet was expensive, designed to repel liquids, but champagne was tricky, all that sugar. I worked methodically, aware of Marco watching me like a hawk from across the room. So focused was I on the task that I didn't notice the presence behind me until a shadow fell across the carpet. A pair of immaculately polished Italian leather shoes appeared at the edge of my vision. My gaze traveled upward, past the perfectly tailored trousers, the jacket that hung with the ease only true craftsmanship could achieve, to find myself looking directly into the storm-gray eyes of Alessio Vitrelli. This close, I could smell his cologne, something earthy and expensive, like aged wood and rare spices. My heart hammered against my ribs as he regarded me with cool interest, as one might observe an unusual insect. "You found my wine," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my bones. Not a question, but a statement. I swallowed hard. "I just remembered seeing it, sir." Something flickered in those gray depths. Amusement, perhaps. "Observant," he noted. "A valuable quality." Before I could respond, one of his bodyguards approached, leaning in to murmur something in his ear. Vitrelli's expression hardened imperceptibly, and he gave a curt nod. "We're leaving." he announced to no one in particular, though the staff seemed to materialize instantly to assist with coats and doors. I remained frozen on my knees, feeling as if I'd just had a close encounter with something dangerous and beautiful, like watching a jaguar from too small a distance. Only when he had disappeared through the front door, his entourage trailing behind him, did I remember to breathe. Marco appeared beside me, his face tight with an emotion I couldn't quite read. "Finish up and help with closing," he ordered, then hesitated. "Mr. Vitrelli doesn't usually notice the staff," he added, a question lurking beneath the statement. I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the carpet. I just got lucky with the wine. But as I worked through the final hour of my shift, wiping down tables and folding napkins with mechanical precision, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight, some invisible thread of fate, plucked by careless fingers. It was ridiculous, of course. Men like Alessio Vitrelli existed in a different stratosphere from women like me. Our worlds had brushed against each other for the briefest moment, and now they would continue on their separate orbits, never to intersect again. How terribly, catastrophically wrong I was. Borrowed warmth. The rain had transformed into a deluge by the time my shift ended. Water sluiced down the restaurant's elegant awning and sheets as I huddled just inside the doorway, clutching my thin jacket around me. The last bus to my neighborhood had departed 20 minutes ago, and the thought of the long walk home in this weather made my already aching body protest. "You need cab fare?" asked Jenna, one of the waitresses, as she tugged on her raincoat. I shook my head, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. My apartment's not far." The lie came easily after years of practice. Pride was sometimes the only thing I owned that nobody could take from me. "Suit yourself." She shrugged, dashing out into the rain toward a waiting rideshare. I took a deep breath and stepped out from under the shelter of the awning. The cold water immediately penetrated my jacket, plastering my hair to my face and sending shivers down my spine. Head down, I began the long trek home, mentally calculating how many hours of sleep I could get before needing to wake the twins for their breakfast. 3 blocks from the restaurant, my phone buzzed. Mrs. Patel. "Maya? The little one's cough is worse," she said without preamble, her voice tight with concern. "She's having trouble breathing. I was going to call an ambulance, but I know how you feel about the expense." My heart dropped like a stone. "I'm on my way," I said, already breaking into a run, heedless of the rain soaking me to the skin. Lily had been born with asthma, her lungs just a little weaker than her sister's. Usually, her inhaler was enough to manage it, but the change in seasons always made it worse, and the prescription for her stronger medication was sitting unfilled at the pharmacy, because I'd had to choose between that and rent this month. I was so focused on getting home that I didn't notice the sleek black car gliding alongside me until it honked softly. I jumped, instinctively stepping away from the curb as the rear window rolled down. "You'll catch pneumonia," said a now familiar voice, deep and commanding. Alessio Vitrelli sat in the back seat, regarding me with those penetrating gray eyes. Up close, I could see flecks of silver in them, like metal shavings caught in storm clouds. "I'm fine," I said automatically, wrapping my arms tighter around myself as another violent shiver ran through me. His eyebrow arched slightly. "Clearly." The word dripped with sarcasm. "Get in." It wasn't a request, but my daughter was wheezing, possibly needing emergency care, and I didn't have time for whatever this was. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to get home to my daughters. One of them is sick." My voice cracked on the last word, betraying my panic. Something shifted in his expression, a barely perceptible softening. "Address?" he asked simply. I hesitated. Every instinct warned against telling this dangerous man where my children slept. But Lily's face floated before me, her lips tinged blue during her last bad attack, and practicality overrode caution. I rattled off my address in the East District, bracing for the flicker of disdain that usually crossed people's faces when they realized I lived in the city's poorest neighborhood. Instead, Vitrelli merely nodded and pushed the door open wider. "That's on our way. Get in." The interior of the car was warm and smelled of leather and that same woody cologne. A privacy screen separated us from the driver. The other bodyguard, the one who'd whispered in Vitrelli's ear at the restaurant, sat in the front passenger seat, his broad shoulders visible through the tinted partition. I perched on the edge of the seat, hyper-aware of the water dripping from my clothes, onto what was undoubtedly handcrafted Italian leather. "Thank you," I murmured, keeping my eyes fixed on my trembling hands. "You're the wine girl," he said after a moment of silence, his voice contemplative. Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Is that my new title?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "You have a name, I assume." "Maya Reeves." He nodded, as if filing this information away. "Your daughter, what's wrong with her?" "Asthma. She's 5. I didn't know why I was telling him this. Perhaps it was the strange intimacy of the car, cocooned against the storm outside. Or perhaps it was simply that no one had asked me a direct question about my children in longer than I could remember. "Twins, you said, identical?" I blinked in surprise. "Yes. How did you—" "You mentioned daughters, plural, but referenced only one age." He shrugged, as if this deduction was obvious. "The sick one. What treatment does she need?" I twisted my hands in my lap. "Her inhaler isn't working well enough. She needs the stronger prescription, but I haven't been able to—" I trailed off, unwilling to admit my financial situation to this man who probably spent more on a single meal than I earned in a month, but he seemed to understand anyway. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He pressed a button on his armrest. "Antonio, stop at the 24-hour pharmacy on 7th. The car changed direction smoothly. I stared at him, confused. "What are you doing?" "Solving a problem." His tone made it clear he wasn't accustomed to explaining himself. 20 minutes later, we pulled up outside my apartment building, a crumbling 5-story walk-up with graffiti-covered walls and a security door that hadn't locked properly since I moved in 3 years ago. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle, but rivers still ran along the gutters, carrying cigarette butts and candy wrappers toward clogged storm drains. In my lap was a bag containing not only Lily's prescription, filled without my insurance card or even a phone call to the doctor, just a few quiet words from Vitrelli to the pharmacist, but also a nebulizer machine and several additional medications the pharmacist had recommended. "I can't accept this," I'd protested in the store. "I can't pay you back." Vitrelli had simply walked away mid-sentence, leaving me clutching the bag as he completed whatever transaction had occurred with the wide-eyed pharmacist. Now, faced with the reality of my life, the stark contrast between his world and mine laid bare. Shame burned in my cheeks. "Thank you for the ride, and for this." I clutched the pharmacy bag like a lifeline. "I should go check on Lily." I reached for the door handle, but his voice stopped me. "Your building has no security." It wasn't a question. I sighed. "The landlord keeps promising to fix the door." His expression darkened. "And your apartment?" "3rd floor." "Look, I really appreciate everything, but I need to— I'm coming up." Again, not a request. Panic fluttered in my chest. "That's really not necessary." "It wasn't an offer, Maya." My name in his mouth sounded different somehow, weighted with an authority that brooked no argument. Before I could protest further, he was out of the car, holding the door open for me. Rain beaded on his expensive wool coat, but he seemed indifferent to it. The bodyguard from the front seat materialized beside him, scanning the street with practiced efficiency. "Domenico stays with the car," Vitrelli explained, nodding toward the driver. "Stefano comes with us." I wanted to argue, to tell this presumptuous man that he couldn't just insert himself into my life, but Lily's wheezing cough echoed in my memory, and I swallowed my pride. If nothing else, Stefano looked strong enough to carry her to the car if we needed to go to the hospital. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete and someone's overcooked cabbage. A flickering fluorescent light cast sickly shadows as we climbed, making me acutely aware of every piece of peeling paint, every cracked tile. I'd long since stopped noticing these things, but seeing my daily environment through a stranger's eyes, especially one accustomed to luxury, made my throat tight with humiliation. Mrs. Patel's door opened before we reached the 3rd floor. She poked her head out, her silver-streaked hair in a hasty bun, concern etched on her kind face. "Maya, thank goodness. She's been asking for you." Her eyes widened as she registered my companions. "Oh. It's okay, Mrs. Patel. This is—" I faltered, unsure how to introduce Alessio Vitrelli. "My boss? My benefactor? The mafia kingpin who bought my daughter's medicine?" "A friend," he supplied smoothly, his voice warmer than I'd heard it before. He extended his hand to my neighbor, Alessio. "Thank you for looking after Maya's daughters." Mrs. Patel blushed like a schoolgirl as she shook his hand. Of course, of course. Such sweet girls. I've moved them to your apartment, Maya." Lily seemed more comfortable in her own bed. I thanked her profusely, promising to bring her famous coconut cookies from the bakery near the restaurant, then hurried the remaining few steps to my door. The lock stuck, as it always did, requiring a specific jiggle and lift maneuver that I performed automatically. My apartment was small, one bedroom that I shared with the twins, a bathroom with temperamental plumbing, and a combined living room or kitchen area that I'd done my best to make cheerful with secondhand furniture and bright throw pillows. What it lacked in space and modern amenities, it made up for in cleanliness. I might not have much, but what I had was well cared for. The twins' artwork covered the refrigerator. A bookshelf overflowed with library books and yard sale finds. A collection of pine cones and pretty rocks, treasures from our Sunday walks in the park, lined the windowsill. It wasn't much, but it was ours. "Mommy?" A small voice called from the bedroom. "I'm here, baby," I answered, rushing toward the sound, pharmacy bag clutched tightly. The twins were curled together on the queen bed we all shared, two dark heads on the same pillow. Despite being identical, I could always tell them apart instantly. Emma sat up when I entered, her eyes wide with worry. Beside her, Lily's chest rose and fell with labored breaths, each inhalation a visible struggle. She kept saying her chest was tight, Emma reported solemnly, taking her role as the healthy twin very seriously. I sat on the edge of the bed, brushing damp hair from Lily's forehead. Her skin was clammy, and there was a faint bluish tinge around her lips that sent fear stabbing through me. "Mommy's here now," I murmured, already unpacking the nebulizer with shaking hands. "We're going to make you feel better." I was so focused on assembling the machine that I barely registered Vitrelli's presence until he knelt beside me, taking the nebulizer parts from my trembling fingers. "Let me," he said quietly, his large hands moving with surprising dexterity as he connected tubes and poured medication. I stared at him, bewildered by the incongruity of this powerful, dangerous man, assembling a child's breathing machine on my threadbare carpet. "My nephew has asthma," he explained, not looking up. "Go change out of those wet clothes before you get sick too. I'll finish this." Too exhausted and worried to argue, I grabbed dry clothes and ducked into the bathroom. When I emerged in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, the nebulizer was running, its gentle hum filling the small bedroom. Lily sat propped against pillows, the mask over her nose and mouth, her breathing already easier. Emma had nestled against her side protectively. Even more surprisingly, Vitrelli sat on the edge of the bed, his suit jacket and tie removed, shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing corded forearms dusted with dark hair. He was showing the girls something on his phone, a game or video that had even Lily smiling behind her mask. Emma looked up as I entered. "Mommy, Mr. Al says we can have pizza tomorrow. Real pizza from a restaurant, not frozen." "Does he now?" I raised an eyebrow at Vitrelli, who met my gaze unapologetically. "I also said only if Mommy agrees," he amended, the corner of his mouth lifting in what might have been the beginning of a smile. I should have been alarmed by how quickly he'd ingratiated himself with my children. I should have been wary of his motives, suspicious of his generosity. But in that moment, seeing Lily's breathing ease and the worry fade from Emma's small face, I could only feel grateful. "We'll see," I hedged, sitting on Lily's other side and taking her small hand in mine. "How are you feeling, Sweet Pea?" She gave me a thumbs up, her eyes already drooping as the medication took effect, and the adrenaline of fear receded. "The medication will make her sleepy," Vitrelli said softly. "She should keep the mask on for at least 10 minutes. I nodded, gently stroking Lily's hair as her breathing deepened. Emma, never one to be left out, crawled into my lap, her small body warm against mine. "You're all wet, Mommy," she complained, poking at my still damp hair. "It's raining," I explained, dropping a kiss on top of her head. "You should have taken an umbrella," she said with the absolute certainty of a 5-year-old. Vitrelli made a sound that might have been a chuckle. Smart girl. Emma beamed at the praise, then yawned widely, her own eyelids growing heavy. It was well past midnight, hours after their usual bedtime. Shall I take the mask when she's done? Vitrelli asked, his voice low. You look like you need rest too. I nodded gratefully, suddenly aware of the bone-deep exhaustion weighing me down. The adrenaline that had carried me through the evening was dissipating rapidly, leaving me hollow and drained. The last thing I remembered was leaning back against the headboard, Emma's warm weight against my chest, Lily's hand in mine, and Vitrelli's steady presence keeping watch over us all. I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd forgotten to close. For a moment, I was disoriented. I never slept past dawn, always up before the twins to prepare for the day. Then the events of the night before came rushing back. The rain, the car, Lily's wheezing, Vitrelli. I sat up abruptly. The twins weren't in bed beside me. Panic jolted through me as I scrambled to my feet, nearly tripping in my haste. Emma? Lily? I called, rushing into the living room. The scene that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. My daughters sat at the small kitchen table, giggling as they ate what appeared to be freshly delivered breakfast. Not cereal from a box, but proper croissants and fruit arranged on plates I didn't recognize. And there, leaning against the counter with a mug of coffee in his hand, was Alessio Vitrelli. He'd changed clothes, now wearing a fresh navy shirt and black trousers that still screamed money and power, but were more casual than last night's suit. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered. Good morning, he said, his deep voice rumbling through the small space. Coffee? I stared at him, speechless. Stefano, the bodyguard, sat by the door, his large frame making my second-hand armchair look like dollhouse furniture. He nodded respectfully in my direction. Mommy, Emma exclaimed. Look, we got fancy breakfast, and Mr. Al stayed all night to make sure Lily could breathe. She's much better, Vitrelli added, moving to pour coffee into a second mug. I took the liberty of calling Marco. You won't be expected at work today. I accepted the coffee automatically, still trying to process what was happening. You, stayed all night? He shrugged, as if spending the night in a cramped apartment in the city's worst neighborhood was something he did regularly. You and the twins were exhausted. Someone needed to monitor Lily's breathing. Where did you sleep? I asked, then immediately regretted the question. It was none of my business, and the knowing look he gave me made heat rise to my cheeks. The couch is surprisingly comfortable, he replied, amusement evident in his tone. I looked over at the twins, who were happily demolishing their breakfast, apparently completely at ease with the situation. Lily's color was good, her breathing normal. Whatever he'd done, it had worked. Thank you, I said quietly, meaning it despite my confusion. For Lily's medicine, for staying, for... I gestured vaguely at the breakfast. Something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps. The girls told me about their father, he said, his voice pitched low so the twins couldn't hear. I tensed. Did they? They said he took their college fund and disappeared. His expression hardened, a glimpse of the dangerous man beneath the surprisingly gentle caretaker. Is that true? I sighed, taking a sip of the coffee. Rich and smooth, nothing like the instant grounds I usually drank. Jason wasn't prepared for fatherhood. When the twins were 2, he cleaned out our savings account, money I'd been putting aside since before they were born, a little each month. Said he needed to find himself. Last I heard, he was in Vegas. What was his full name? Vitrelli asked, his tone casual but his eyes intent. I laughed softly. Are you planning to hunt him down for child support? He didn't smile. Perhaps. Something in his expression sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder that beneath the man who had assembled a nebulizer with practiced hands and kept watch over my daughter all night was someone accustomed to power, to control, to getting exactly what he wanted by any means necessary. It doesn't matter, I said quickly. We're managing. His gaze swept around the apartment, taking in the water stain on the ceiling, the threadbare carpet, the secondhand furniture. Are you? Before I could formulate a response, Emma piped up from the table. "Mommy, can Mr. Al stay for dinner too? He said maybe, but we have to ask you." I looked at Vitrelli, who was watching me with those storm-gray eyes, waiting for my answer. There were 1,000 reasons to say no, to thank him for his help, and politely but firmly show him the door. He was dangerous. He was powerful. He was everything I'd spent my life avoiding. But he had also saved my daughter, had treated my children with a gentleness I hadn't expected, had seen the worst of my life and offered help without judgment. "If Mr. Al isn't too busy," I heard myself saying, "he's welcome to stay." Emma cheered, and even Lily clapped her hands in delight. Vitrelli's mouth curved into a genuine smile, transforming his face from coldly handsome to breathtaking. "I'd like that," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "After all, we should discuss your new job." "My new... what?" He sipped his coffee calmly. "I find myself in need of a personal assistant, someone observant, resourceful, with an excellent memory and uncompromising attention to detail." He paused. "The position comes with comprehensive healthcare benefits for you and the twins." My heart stuttered. "You can't just..." "I can," he interrupted softly, "and I am." I opened my mouth to argue, but Emma suddenly appeared at my side, tugging on my hand. "Mommy," she whispered loudly, "Mr. Al told Lily and me that we're going to be okay now. He said he's going to take care of our family." I looked at Vitrelli sharply. "Did he?" He met my gaze steadily, unapologetic. "I protect what's mine, Maya. We're not yours," I replied automatically, even as something warm and dangerous unfurled in my chest. His smile was slow and certain, like a man who had all the time in the world and knew exactly how the game would end. "Not yet," he agreed, "but you will be." Gilded cage. 2 weeks later, I still couldn't quite believe the turn my life had taken. The day after Lily's asthma attack, Alessio had sent movers to pack up our meager belongings. By nightfall, the twins and I were installed in a spacious 3-bedroom apartment in one of his buildings downtown, a gleaming high-rise with a doorman, a rooftop garden, and security that made Fort Knox look like a playground. My protests had fallen on deaf ears. "It's closer to their new school," he'd said simply, as if moving us into an apartment that probably cost more per month than I made in a year was the most reasonable solution to a long commute. The new job turned out to be exactly what he'd described. I was his personal assistant, managing his schedule, handling correspondence, and generally keeping his chaotic business life in order. What he hadn't mentioned was the salary, triple what I'd made at the restaurant, or that the position came with a driver who took the twins to and from their new private school while I worked at Alessio's downtown office. I'd tried to refuse, of course. "I can't accept all this," I'd insisted, as he showed me around the apartment, the twins racing from room to room with excited squeals. "It's too much." He'd given me that look, the one that made my insides quiver. "Would you prefer your daughters remain in an unsafe building with inadequate heat and a landlord who ignores repair requests?" His voice had been soft, but the steel beneath was unmistakable. "Would you prefer Lily continue to struggle for breath because you can't afford her medication?" Put that way, my objections seemed like foolish pride. And so I'd accepted. The apartment, the job, the school for the twins. I told myself it was temporary, just until I could save enough to stand on my own feet again. The lie was becoming harder to maintain with each passing day. "You look tired," Alessio commented, as he strode into his office, impeccable as always in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "Did Lily have trouble sleeping again?" I glanced up from the correspondence I was sorting. "Just a small coughing fit around midnight. The humidifier helped." He frowned, checking his watch. "Did you call Dr. Mercer?" "First thing this morning. He's stopping by the apartment at 6 to check on her." I hesitated. "You don't need to come. I'm sure you have more important things to do." Alessio's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Nothing is more important." The finality in his tone left no room for argument. It was moments like these that confused me most. The fierce protectiveness he displayed toward the twins, the way he rearranged his schedule to attend Emma's school presentation, or sit with Lily during a nebulizer treatment. It went beyond professional obligation, beyond even the generosity of a wealthy patron. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd become a fixture in our lives. He took dinner with us most evenings, listening to the twins chatter with genuine interest, He helped them with bedtime stories, his deep voice giving life to fairy tale characters. He brought thoughtful gifts, not just toys, but books that matched their interests, art supplies when Emma showed a talent for drawing, a child-sized doctor kit when Lily announced she wanted to be a breath doctor like Dr. Mercer. I told myself he was simply a man with resources who enjoyed helping people in need, but the way his eyes followed me when I moved around the apartment, the brush of his fingers against mine when he handed me coffee in the mornings, the low timbre of his voice when we spoke after the twins were asleep. These things suggested something else entirely, something dangerous, something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. "The Anderson contract needs your signature," I said, changing the subject as I placed a folder before him. "And Senator Mitchell's office called again about the fundraiser next month." Alessio took the folder, his fingers brushing mine deliberately. "Tell the senator I'll attend, but I won't speak." He paused, his storm gray eyes meeting mine. "You'll accompany me." It wasn't a request. It never was with him. "I'll need something to wear," I said, already calculating whether I could find something suitable at a consignment shop. The salary was generous, but I was saving every penny I could, just in case. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Already taken care of. Before I could respond, his office door opened. Stefano, now a familiar presence, stepped in. "Mr. Donati is here." Alessio's expression cooled instantly. He glanced at me. "That's all for now, Maya." I gathered my tablet and notes, recognizing the dismissal. As I moved toward the door, a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair entered. His expensive suit couldn't quite disguise the hardness in his eyes, the look of someone who had clawed his way to the top and enjoyed the blood under his fingernails. "Vitrelli," he said, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent. His gaze flickered to me dismissively, then back to Alessio. "We need to discuss the situation in the harbor district." I slipped past him, feeling the weight of both men's gazes on my back. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but not before I heard Alessio's cold reply. "Touch what's mine again, Donati, and we'll have more than a discussion." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. I'd quickly learned that Alessio's legitimate businesses, real estate, import, export, hospitality, were only part of his empire. There were meetings that didn't appear on any official calendar, calls that were taken in Italian with the office door firmly closed, visitors who arrived without appointments and were shown immediately to Alessio's private conference room. I didn't ask questions. Some things were safer not to know. At 5:30, Alessio emerged from his office, sliding into his coat with fluid grace. "Ready?" he asked, though again, it wasn't really a question. The black Bentley waited at the curb, Domenico holding the door open as we approached. I'd grown somewhat accustomed to the luxury, though I still felt out of place among the soft leather and polished wood interior. "How was school?" I asked the twins when we arrived at the apartment. They'd been home for an hour already, supervised by Maria, the housekeeper who came with the apartment like it was the most natural thing in the world to have someone clean up after you. "I got a gold star for my math," Emma announced, proudly showing me a worksheet covered in neat numbers. "I made a friend," Lily added, her voice still slightly raspy but stronger than it had been in months. "Her name is Zoe, and she has light-up shoes." I smiled, hanging up my coat. "That's wonderful, sweetie. Can we get light-up shoes too?" Emma asked, looking from me to Alessio with calculated innocence. Before I could explain about budgets and priorities, Alessio nodded. "Of course. We'll go shopping this weekend." I shot him a look that he pretended not to notice as he loosened his tie and knelt to examine Emma's math homework more closely. This was our routine now, this strange domestic tableau that felt both foreign and increasingly natural. By the time Dr. Mercer arrived to check on Lily, we had settled into the comfortable rhythm of a family evening. Homework at the kitchen island, dinner preparations, the twins' cheerful chatter filling the space. "Her lungs sound much better," Dr. Mercer pronounced after examining Lily. He was a distinguished older man with kind eyes, who, I suspected, didn't make house calls for just anyone. "The new medication is working well. And how are you feeling, Miss Emma?" "I'm perfect," Emma declared, twirling to demonstrate her robust health. Dr. Mercer chuckled, packing his stethoscope away. "Indeed you are." He turned to me. "Continue with the current regimen. I'd like to see Lily again in 2 weeks, but call sooner if anything changes." "Thank you for coming, doctor," I said, walking him to the door. He glanced toward the kitchen, where Alessio was helping the twins set the table. "Mr. Vitrelli is very involved with your daughters," he observed neutrally. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "He's been very generous." Dr. Mercer's expression remained professionally blank, but something knowing flickered in his eyes. "I've known Alessio for many years, Maya. He's never shown this kind of interest in," he paused delicately, "in family life." Before I could formulate a response, the doctor patted my arm kindly. "Call if you need anything, day or night." After dinner, bath time and 2 bedtime stories, one from me, one from Alessio, the twins finally drifted off to sleep. I stood in their doorway, watching their peaceful faces, still marveling at how quickly they'd adapted to our new circumstances. Children were resilient that way, accepting good fortune without questioning its source or longevity. I wasn't so easily convinced. "They're settled?" Alessio asked, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine. I nodded, accepting the glass and following him to the living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights. A glittering carpet spread beneath us. I still wasn't used to living in the sky. "Thank you for having Dr. Mercer come," I said, taking a small sip of the wine, something rich and complex that probably cost more than I wanted to know. Alessio settled onto the sofa, his posture relaxed, but still emanating that unmistakable air of control. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," I countered softly. "None of this is nothing. The apartment, the school, the job." I gestured vaguely, encompassing all he had given us. "Why are you doing this, Alessio?" He regarded me steadily over the rim of his glass. "Do you really need to ask?" My heart quickened. "I need to understand." He set his glass down deliberately, then leaned forward, his gaze never leaving mine. "From the moment I saw you in that restaurant, on your knees cleaning up other people's messes, but still noticing everything around you, still carrying yourself with dignity, I knew you were different." His voice was low, intense. "When I learned about your daughters, how you've sacrificed everything for them, it only confirmed what I already knew." "And what was that?" I barely recognized my own voice, breathless and uncertain. "That you were meant to be mine." The simplicity with which he said it, as if stating an obvious fact rather than a shocking declaration, made my pulse stutter. "You and those little girls," I set my glass down with a shaking hand. "We're not possessions, Alessio. You can't just decide we belong to you." "Can't I?" There was no arrogance in the question, just genuine curiosity. "I've given you security, comfort, opportunities for your daughters. I've made your lives better in every measurable way, because you had the power and resources to do so," I countered. "That doesn't make us yours." He considered this, head tilted slightly. "What would then?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "What would make you mine?" He leaned closer, his scent, that earthy cologne mingled with something uniquely him, enveloping me. "Because I'm a patient man, Maya, but my patience has limits. Tell me what you need, and I'll provide it." The raw honesty in his voice made my chest tighten. This wasn't the calculated manipulation of a man accustomed to buying what he wanted. This was something else, something almost vulnerable beneath the power and control. "I need time," I whispered. "This has all happened so fast. 2 weeks ago, I was worried about eviction notices and medical bills. Now I'm living in a penthouse with a job I never applied for, and a man who says I belong to him." His jaw tightened, but he nodded once, sharply. "Time, then. But understand this, Maya. I protect what's mine, whether you've accepted it yet or not. You and those girls are under my protection now. Nothing and no one will harm you." The conviction in his voice sent a shiver down my spine, half fear, half something else I wasn't ready to name. "Is that what you were discussing with Mr. Donati today? Protection?" His expression shuddered instantly. "You don't want to know about Donati, but I did. In the 2 weeks I'd worked for him, I'd pieced together enough to understand that beneath Alessio's legitimate business empire lay something darker, more dangerous. The hushed conversations, the coded messages, the meetings that occurred after hours with men whose eyes held the same hard calculation as Donati's. All pointed to the rumors I'd heard long before I met him. "If I'm going to be part of your life," I said carefully, "I need to know what that means. All of it." He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair in a rare gesture of uncertainty. "My father came to this country with nothing," he began, his voice low. "He built a life for our family the only way he could. By providing services others were unwilling or unable to provide themselves. Protection, dispute resolution, access to goods that weren't easily available through conventional channels. He was in the Mafia," I translated flatly. Alessio's mouth twitched. "That's a simplistic term, but yes. When he died, I inherited not only his legitimate businesses, but his other obligations. I've spent the past decade legitimizing as much as possible, but some associations can't be severed so easily. Like Donati." His expression hardened. "Donati is a problem that will be dealt with." I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the dangerous ground I was treading. Is he a threat? Not anymore. The cold certainty in his voice made my blood run cold. I stood abruptly, needing space, air, distance from the intensity of his gaze. "I should check on the twins." His hand caught mine as I turned to go, his grip gentle but immovable. "You asked for honesty, Maya. This is who I am. I've built an empire, some of it in the light, some in shadow. I protect what's mine with every resource at my disposal." His thumb traced circles on my wrist, sending tingles up my arm. "But I would never bring darkness to your door, or to those little girls. You are separate from that world. Sacred." The raw sincerity in his voice made my heart clench. Despite everything, the unnerving declarations of possession, the glimpses of a dangerous world beneath the polished exterior, I believed him. In the 2 weeks I'd known him, he'd shown nothing but gentleness toward me and the twins. Whatever violence and power lay in his hands, he'd use them only to shield us, never to threaten. "I believe you," I said softly. Something flickered in his eyes, relief, perhaps, or triumph. He tugged gently on my hand, drawing me back down beside him, closer than before. "Then trust me when I say you have nothing to fear," he murmured, his free hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from my face. "Not from me, not from anyone." His touch lingered, fingers trailing along my jawline with exquisite gentleness. My breath caught as his gaze dropped to my lips, the intent in his storm-gray eyes unmistakable. "Alessio," I whispered, unsure if I was warning him away or inviting him closer. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice a low rumble that I felt more than heard. I should have. This man had upended my life, had declared ownership of me and my children with casual certainty, had admitted to connections with a criminal underworld I could scarcely comprehend. Everything about him screamed danger. But in that moment, with his warmth so close and his eyes dark with desire, I couldn't form the words. His lips met mine with surprising gentleness, a question rather than a demand. I answered without thinking, my hands finding their way to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath expensive fabric. He tasted of wine and something darker, more addictive. His hands remained respectful, one at my waist, the other cradling my face as if I were something precious, breakable. When we finally parted, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine. "You see?" he murmured. "Already mine." Reality crashed back like a cold wave. I pulled away, shaken by how easily I'd fallen under his spell. "That doesn't mean what you think it means." Instead of anger, his expression held only patient certainty. "It means exactly what I think. You're fighting it because you're afraid. Not of me, but of depending on someone after being alone for so long." His hand found mine again, fingers intertwining. "But you're not alone anymore, Maya. And you never will be again." The promise in his words terrified and tempted me in equal measure. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it automatically, then froze. The number was unfamiliar, but the message sent ice through my veins. Does Vitrelli know the truth about the twins' father? Would be a shame if he found out, wouldn't it? Maybe we should talk. J. Jason. It had to be. But how had he found me? And what did he mean about the truth? What is it? Alessio asked, instantly alert to my distress. I forced a smile, turning off the screen. Nothing important, just a reminder about a school form for the twins. He studied me for a moment, clearly not believing me, but didn't press. It's getting late. You should rest. I nodded, grateful for the reprieve. Good night, Alessio. He caught my hand as I stood, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that shouldn't have felt so intimate. Sweet dreams, Maya. That night, I lay awake long after the apartment had gone quiet, staring at the message on my phone. Jason had been out of our lives for 3 years. Why resurface now? And how had he even known about Alessio? The sick feeling in my stomach intensified as I considered the implications. If Jason was back, if he started making demands or threats, everything I'd built for the twins could come crashing down. Worse, if Alessio discovered the secret I'd kept hidden for 5 years, his protection might vanish as quickly as it had appeared. Because the truth was, Jason wasn't just some boyfriend who'd stolen our savings and disappeared. He was the twins' father on paper only. The real father was a man I'd met just once. A wealthy businessman passing through town who'd bought me a drink, then another, then invited me back to his hotel. I'd been young, naive, desperate for one night of feeling special instead of invisible. I never told him about the pregnancy, never tried to find him. The twins were mine, and mine alone. But now, with Jason's threatening message burning a hole in my phone and Alessio's possessive declaration echoing in my ears, I wondered how long I could keep my secrets buried, and what would happen when they inevitably came to light. As if summoned by my thoughts, a soft knock sounded at my bedroom door. I hastily wiped away tears I hadn't realized I'd shed and called, "Come in." The door opened to reveal Alessio, still fully dressed despite the late hour. His expression was troubled, his usual composure fractured by something that looked almost like uncertainty. "You're crying," he observed, moving to sit on the edge of my bed without invitation. "Tell me why." It wasn't a request. With him, it never was. "Just overwhelmed," I said, the half-truth sticking in my throat. His eyes, silver in the dim light from the hallway, studied me with unsettling intensity. "There's more." I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "Alessio, please. It's late and I'm tired." His hand caught my chin, gently but firmly turning my face back to his. "No more secrets between us, Maya. Not now, not after tonight. One kiss." And he thought he had the right to all my truths. The presumption would have angered me if not for the genuine concern in his eyes. "Some secrets are mine to keep," I whispered. His jaw tightened. "Not from me. Not anymore." We stared at each other in the half-darkness, locked in a silent battle of wills. I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that this was a defining moment, that whatever I chose to reveal or conceal would shape everything that followed. In the end, it was the memory of his gentleness with the twins that decided me. Whatever else Alessio Vitrelli might be, he had shown nothing but care for my daughters. They deserved stability, protection, the security he offered. And if that meant risking his rejection of me, it was a price I had to pay. "Jason texted me tonight," I said finally, my voice barely audible. "He's threatening to tell you the truth about the twins' father." Alessio went very still, his expression unreadable. "And what truth would that be?" I took a deep breath, closing my eyes against the tears that threatened again. "That he's not their biological father. That no one is. At least, no one who's been in their lives." When I dared to look at him again, his face was like stone. "Explain." "The loneliness after my mother died. The night in the hotel bar, the handsome stranger whose name I barely remembered, whose face had blurred in my memory, until all that remained was the kindness in his eyes when he'd kissed me goodbye in the morning. I never told him," I finished, my voice hoarse from emotion. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was alone. Then I met Jason, and he seemed so excited about the babies. He signed the birth certificates, promised we'd be a family. I wanted to believe him. Throughout my confession, Alessio remained motionless, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. When I finally fell silent, the weight of his judgment seemed to press on my chest until I could barely breathe. "So Jason is leveraging this information. he said at last, his voice controlled, dangerously soft, threatening to tell me the twins aren't his biological children, as if that would change how I feel about them. A muscle ticked in his jaw, as if I wouldn't still consider them mine. My head snapped up, hope fluttering weakly in my chest. You're not angry? At you? For what? For being alone and vulnerable? For wanting to give your daughters a father? He shook his head, his expression softening. No, Maya, I'm not angry at you, but at Jason. A cold smile curved his lips. Jason has made a grave miscalculation. One he'll regret. A chill ran down my spine. Alessio, don't what? Don't protect what's mine? Don't eliminate a threat to my family? His voice was deadly calm. I told you who I am, Maya. I don't make empty threats, and I don't tolerate those who threaten what belongs to me. The twins and I don't belong to you, I protested weakly, though the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. His smile widened, showing teeth. Lie to yourself if you must, but don't lie to me. He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with devastating gentleness. You became mine the moment I saw you in that restaurant. The twins became mine the night I sat by Lily's bed, watching her breathe, and nothing, not Jason, not your past, nothing, will change that. The conviction in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it filled a hollow space in my chest I hadn't realized was there. A space carved by years of struggling alone, of having no one to depend on but myself. What are you going to do? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. Don't concern yourself with Jason, he said, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. He won't trouble you again. He stood, towering over me in the darkness. Try to sleep. Tomorrow is Saturday. We promised the girls light-up shoes, remember? The casual shift from veiled threats to domestic plans left me reeling. Before I could respond, he bent down and pressed a kiss to my forehead, his lips lingering against my skin. Sleep well, Maya, he murmured. You're safe now, all of you. As he moved to the door, I found my voice. Alessio? He paused, looking back. Thank you, I said softly. For still wanting you? He finished, his voice a low rumble in the darkness. Never doubt that, Maya. Never. After he left, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I should have been terrified by his casual references to eliminating Jason, by his unwavering certainty that we belonged to him. I should have been planning our escape from this gilded cage he'd built around us. Instead, for the first time in years, I felt something like peace settle over me. Whatever Alessio was, dangerous, possessive, ruthless, he was also a shield between my daughters and a world that had never shown them much kindness. And perhaps, whispered a treacherous voice in my heart, he could be a shield for me too. The last thought before sleep claimed me was simple, startling in its clarity. I was falling for a man who called himself owner, when what he meant was protector, and God help me, I was beginning to think they might be the same thing after all. Claimed. The next 3 months passed in a blur of domesticity, interspersed with moments that reminded me exactly who Alessio Vitrelli was. We settled into a routine that felt surreal in its normalcy. Weekday mornings were a cheerful chaos of breakfast preparations, school bags, and last-minute permission slips. Weekends brought outings to parks, museums, and the occasional movie, Stefano and Domenico always discreetly present but never intruding. Evenings were filled with homework, dinner conversations, and bedtime stories. I continued working as Alessio's assistant, gradually taking on more responsibilities as I proved my competence. The work was challenging but fulfilling, organizing his legitimate business affairs while carefully avoiding any knowledge of the other side of his empire. He never brought that darkness home, never discussed it in my presence, maintaining the careful separation he'd promised. As for Jason, he'd gone silent after that single text message. When I'd hesitantly asked Alessio what had happened, he'd simply said, "He won't be contacting you again," in a tone that discouraged further questions. I tried not to think about what that might mean. And then there was Alessio himself, the growing complication in my carefully ordered life. After our kiss that night, he hadn't pushed for more, seemingly content to integrate himself into our family at a pace that wouldn't overwhelm me. He was patient but persistent, his intentions clear in every lingering touch, every heated glance, every domestic decision made with an assumption of permanence. "Lily needs a follow-up with Dr. Weber next month," he'd say. Or, "I've arranged swimming lessons for the girls this summer." Or, "The school's winter gala is on our calendar." Our calendar. Our family. Our life together. The language of possession and belonging slipped into everyday conversation so naturally I barely noticed it anymore. What I did notice was how he'd begun staying over more frequently. First on the sofa, then eventually in my bed. Though he'd been surprisingly restrained, limiting our intimacy to heated kisses and embraces that left me frustrated and yearning for more. When I'd questioned his restraint, he'd simply smiled that knowing smile. "When it happens," he'd murmured against my neck, "it won't be a half measure taken in haste. It will be a claiming, Maya, and you'll be fully mine, with no reservations, no doubts." The promise had sent shivers down my spine, equal parts anticipation and trepidation. It was on a crisp December morning with snow falling gently outside our windows that everything changed. The twins were buzzing with excitement about the upcoming school holiday party, chattering over breakfast about costumes and performances, while Alessio and I moved around the kitchen in the domestic choreography we'd perfected. "Daddy Al, will you help me with my snowflake dance?" Emma asked, tugging on Alessio's sleeve. The nickname had appeared about a month ago, first from Lily, then immediately adopted by Emma with the twin synchronicity that still amazed me. I'd tried to redirect them at first, worried about Alessio's reaction, but he'd welcomed it with such obvious pleasure that I'd stopped trying to correct them. "Of course, Piccola," he replied, dropping a kiss on her head. "After school today." "You promised to help me with my lines too," Lily reminded him, not to be outdone. "I remember," he assured her solemnly. "We'll practice both." The domestic scene was so perfect it made my chest ache. This was what I'd always wanted for them. Stability, security, a father figure who adored them. Yet beneath the contentment lurked the constant awareness that it all balanced on Alessio's continued interest, his continued desire to claim us as his own. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. "That's Stefano," Alessio said, glancing at his watch. "Time for school, little ones." The usual morning flurry followed. Jackets, scarves, forgotten homework, final kisses. When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt suddenly larger, quieter. Alessio turned to me, his expression shifting from doting father to something more intense. "We need to talk," he said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small velvet box. My heart stuttered to a halt, then resumed at double speed. "Alessio." He placed the box on the kitchen island between us, making no move to open it. 3 months ago, I told you that you and the twins were mine. I've given you time to accept that truth, to see that I can be what you all need." I stared at the velvet box, unable to tear my gaze away. "Is that what I think it is? Look at me, Maya." I forced my eyes up to his. The intensity in his storm-gray gaze nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. "I want to make it official," he continued. "I want the twins to be legally mine. Adoption papers are being drawn up, and I want you to be my wife." Despite suspecting what was coming, the blunt declaration still caught me off guard. "You don't do anything halfway, do you?" A slight smile curved his lips. "Never." I gestured at the box. "Aren't you going to ask properly? Get down on one knee?" His eyebrow arched. "I don't beg, Maya, even for things I want desperately." His voice softened. "But I will ask. Will you marry me? Will you allow me to adopt Emma and Lily? To give them my name, my protection, everything I have to offer?" The question hung between us, weighted with significance beyond an ordinary proposal. This wasn't just about love or companionship, though I couldn't deny those feelings had grown steadily over our months together. This was about accepting all of him. The tender father who braided the twins' hair, the powerful businessman who commanded respect, and the dangerous man who made problems disappear. "If I say yes," I began carefully, "I need promises from you." His expression remained impassive, but I'd learned to read the minute changes, the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated wariness. "What promises?" "The twins must always be shielded from your other business. Completely." He inclined his head. That was never in question. I won't be involved in anything illegal. I won't turn a blind eye if you ever put them at risk through your connections. Their safety is my highest priority, he said, his voice hardening. I would die before allowing harm to come to them. Or to you. I took a deep breath. And I need to know what happened to Jason. This time his expression did change. A flash of something cold and deadly in his eyes before he controlled it. Why? Because I need to know what kind of man I'm agreeing to marry, I said steadily. What kind of father my daughters will have. Alessio was silent for a long moment, studying me with unsettling intensity. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Jason is alive, if that's your concern, he said flatly. He's currently employed on an oil rig in the North Sea, a job that pays exceptionally well and will keep him occupied for the foreseeable future. He signed away any claim to the twins in exchange for the position, and a significant sum deposited in an offshore account. Relief washed through me. I'd feared much worse. You didn't kill him? Alessio's mouth twisted. He's not worth the complication. Besides, dead men sometimes leave messy questions. Living men who understand the consequences of crossing me are much more useful. The cold practicality in his voice reminded me of exactly who he was. Not just the man who read bedtime stories and attended school functions, but someone who calculated the strategic value of life and death with dispassionate precision. And if I say no? I asked quietly. To the proposal? To the adoption? What then? Something flashed in his eyes. Pain. Quickly masked. Then we continue as we are. I'm a patient man, Maya. The twins already think of me as their father. You're already in my bed, even if we haven't yet consummated what we both want. His voice dropped lower. I'm willing to wait for you to accept what's already true, that you're mine in every way that matters. The certainty in his voice should have angered me, but instead, it sent a thrill of something dangerous and heady through my veins. Over the past months, I'd come to understand that Alessio's possessiveness wasn't about control for its own sake. It was about protection, about cherishing what he considered precious. And somehow, against all odds, my daughters and I had become precious to one of the most dangerous men in the city. Open the box, he said softly. With trembling fingers, I lifted the velvet lid. Nestled inside was a ring that took my breath away, not for its obvious value, though the central diamond was certainly impressive, but for its thoughtful design. The diamond was embraced by two smaller stones, one pink and one blue, the twins' birthstones, and the band was engraved with delicate vines that reminded me of the botanical illustrations in the vintage book we'd found at a museum gift shop, the one that had made me pause with unexpected delight. He'd been paying attention. All this time, he'd been noticing the small details that made me who I was. It's beautiful, I whispered, emotion tightening my throat. Is that a yes? His voice remained steady, but I caught the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. Perhaps the first time I'd seen genuine uncertainty from him. In that moment, the last of my resistance crumbled. This powerful, dangerous man who commanded an empire with unflinching authority was standing before me, waiting for my answer with something almost like fear in his eyes. He, who took what he wanted without hesitation, was asking for my consent to make official what he already considered fact. Yes, I said, the word both surrender and victory. Yes to all of it. The tension drained from his shoulders, replaced by a fierce joy that transformed his face. He took the ring from the box and slid it onto my finger with deliberate slowness, his eyes never leaving mine. Mine, he said softly. The word a caress and a claim. This time, I didn't argue. Yours. His kiss was different from the others we'd shared. Deeper, hungrier. The restraint of the past months finally breaking. His hands cradled my face with devastating tenderness, even as his mouth claimed mine with unmistakable possession. I melted into him, my body recognizing what my mind had been slow to accept, that I'd been his since that rainy night when he'd appeared in a black car like some dark guardian angel. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Tonight, he promised, his voice rough with desire. After the twins are asleep, no more waiting. The shiver that ran through me had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with anticipation. Tonight, I agreed. The day passed in a haze of ordinary tasks infused with extraordinary meaning. I accompanied Alessio to his office, fielded calls, organized his schedule, all while the weight of the ring on my finger reminded me of what awaited us. If his business associates noticed the new addition to my hand, they were too well trained to comment on it, though Stefano allowed himself a small smile when he caught sight of it. We picked the twins up from school together, their delighted squeals when they spotted us both waiting at the gate, drawing indulgent smiles from other parents. They chatted excitedly all the way home, their holiday performance anxiety momentarily forgotten in the thrill of having both of us there. It was over dinner, homemade pasta that Alessio had insisted on preparing himself, a skill inherited from his Sicilian grandmother, that we shared our news. "Emma, Lily," Alessio began, his voice unusually gentle. "Your mother and I have something important to ask you." The twins looked up from their plates, curiosity bright in their identical dark eyes. "How would you feel if I officially became your daddy?" he asked. "If I adopted you and you had my last name?" Their reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Emma launched herself from her chair to throw her arms around his neck, while Lily's eyes widened with delight. "Really?" Lily asked, looking to me for confirmation. "Forever and ever?" I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "Forever and ever. And," Alessio continued, once Emma had settled back in her seat, "your mother has agreed to marry me. We're going to be a real family." "We're already a real family," Emma declared with 5-year-old certainty, "but now everyone else will know it too." Out of the mouths of babes. She was right, of course. Somewhere along the way, without official papers or ceremonies, we had become a family. The legal formalities would only confirm what was already true in our hearts. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of excitement as the twins peppered us with questions about the wedding, about their new last name, about whether we could get a puppy now that we were officially a family. Alessio's indulgent "we'll see" made me suspect a dog was in our near future. By the time we tucked them into bed, they were exhausted from the emotional day, drifting off to sleep almost immediately. I stood in their doorway, watching their peaceful faces, overwhelmed by how much had changed in just a few months. "Having second thoughts?" Alessio asked quietly, coming up behind me, his arms encircling my waist. I leaned back against his solid warmth. "No, just marveling at how we got here. 6 months ago, I was cleaning tables and worrying about eviction notices. Now I'm engaged to one of the most powerful men in the city, and my daughters are going to have your name." His lips found the sensitive spot below my ear. "Our daughters," he corrected. "They've been ours since the night I sat by Lily's bed, watching her breathe." The memory of that night, his unexpected gentleness, the careful way he'd assembled the nebulizer, how naturally he'd interacted with the twins, had been the first crack in my defenses. I turned in his arms, looping my hands behind his neck. "Our daughters," I agreed. "But you have to help me keep them from becoming completely spoiled. No more impulsive shopping sprees or surprise ponies." He grinned, unrepentant. "I make no promises, but I will consult you first. That's all I ask." His expression grew serious, his hands tightening on my waist. "Are you ready for tonight, Maya? For what it means?" The heat in his eyes made my pulse quicken. "Yes." "Once we do this, there's no going back," he warned softly. "You'll be mine completely, body, heart, future. I don't share what belongs to me, and I don't let it go." The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me, but instead, it sent a thrill of anticipation down my spine. Over these months, I'd come to understand that Alessio's need to possess wasn't about control for its own sake. It was about protection, about cherishing what he valued above all else. "I understand," I whispered. His smile was slow and predatory. "Do you?" Before I could respond, he swept me into his arms with startling ease, carrying me toward the master bedroom. I wrapped my arms around his neck, breathless with anticipation and a strange sense of inevitability, as if every moment since that rainy night had been leading us here, to this claiming. The bedroom door closed behind us with a soft click, and Alessio set me gently on my feet. His eyes never left mine as he began unbuttoning his shirt with deliberate slowness. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, his voice rough with desire. In answer, I reached for the hem of my own sweater, pulling it over my head in one fluid motion. His eyes darkened as they took in the simple lace of my bra, his control visibly fraying. "No going back," I agreed softly, reaching for him. What followed was everything he'd promised, acclaiming in the truest sense, his hands and mouth learning every inch of me with possessive thoroughness, his whispered Italian endearments and commands leaving me breathless. There was tenderness in his touch, but also an unmistakable ownership that should have frightened me, but instead drove me higher, until pleasure crested in waves that left me gasping his name. Afterward, as we lay tangled in sheets, my head on his chest and his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder, he spoke the words I'd been waiting to hear. "I love you," he said simply. "You and the twins. You're everything I never knew I needed." I lifted my head to look at him, finding unexpected vulnerability in his storm-gray eyes. "I love you too," I whispered, the truth of it settling into my bones. "Even though you're bossy and overprotective and impossibly stubborn." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest against my ear. "You wouldn't want me any other way." "No," I agreed, smiling. "I wouldn't." We fell into comfortable silence, the gentle rhythm of his heartbeat lulling me toward sleep. Just as I was drifting off, a small sound from the doorway caught my attention. Emma stood there in her favorite unicorn pajamas, her dark hair tousled from sleep, her eyes wide. "Emma?" I sat up quickly, clutching the sheet to my chest. "What's wrong, sweetie?" "Lily had a bad dream," she reported solemnly. "She's crying." Before I could move, Alessio was already out of bed, pulling on his discarded pants with efficient movements. "I'll check on her," he said, dropping a kiss on my forehead. "You rest." I watched as he scooped Emma into his arms, her small hands immediately wrapping around his neck with complete trust. He whispered something that made her giggle, then carried her back toward the twins' room with the easy confidence of a man who had found his place in the world. My fiancé, my daughter's father, a dangerous man to the rest of the world, but to us, a protector, a provider, a safe harbor. I settled back against the pillows, fingering the engagement ring that sparkled in the soft light from the bedside lamp. The path that had led us here was unconventional, to say the least. From a chance meeting in a restaurant to a rainy night rescue. From a mafia boss's unexpected kindness to a family forged in the most unlikely circumstances. 6 months ago, I'd been a single mother struggling to keep my daughters fed and housed, invisible to the world of power and privilege that Alessio inhabited. Now I was about to become his wife. The twins were about to become his legal daughters, and the future stretched before us, complex perhaps, given who he was, but secure in ways I'd never dared to hope for. I heard his voice in the other room, deep and soothing as he comforted Lily, followed by the twins' soft laughter. The sound wrapped around my heart like a warm embrace. Whatever complications came with loving a man like Alessio Vitrelli, this made it all worthwhile. The family we'd become, the love that had grown between us, the certainty that my daughters would never again want for anything, least of all, a father's devotion. When he returned to our bedroom sometime later, his expression was soft with an emotion I was still getting used to seeing on his usually guarded face. "Everything okay?" I asked as he slid back into bed beside me. He nodded, gathering me against his chest. "Lily had a dream that we moved away and left her behind. I promised her that would never happen. That we're a family now, and families stay together. Always the protector," I murmured, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "Always," he agreed, his arms tightening around me. "For as long as you and the girls are mine." As I drifted toward sleep in the safety of his embrace, I realized that what had once seemed like a possessive claim had transformed into the most precious promise. In Alessio's world, to belong to him meant to be cherished, protected, prioritized above all else. His insistence that we were his wasn't about ownership in the way I'd initially feared. It was about commitment, about a man who had found something worth fighting for, worth changing for, worth building a future around. And somehow, Against all odds, that something was us. The last thought before sleep claimed me was how strange life could be, that I would find completion in the arms of a man who had once terrified me, that my daughters would find a father in the most unexpected place, that what had begun as a desperate night in the rain would end in a love so fierce it redefined everything I thought I knew about belonging. Mine, Alessio whispered against my hair, already half asleep himself. My family. This time, I didn't correct him, because he was right. We were his, just as completely as he was ours, and in that mutual claiming, we had found something precious and rare. A love strong enough to build a future on, a family forged not by blood but by choice, and a home where we all, finally, truly belonged.